So you're a DM who's worried about how to give out magic items? Well, you're in luck, because behind today's secret door, how to give out magic items in D&D. So behind today's secret door, how to give out magic items in D&D. This is Secret Door, a channel devoted to in-depth discussion about Dungeons and Dragons, and my name is Matt Morich. Okay, before I get started, I have started a Patreon. If you're interested in supporting the channel, your help would be greatly appreciated and much needed. And many thanks to Marcelo and Doug for your support. The link will be in the description and in the pinned comment. Okay, so this should be a pretty quick video. The giving out of magic items in D&D is a really big deal. In fact, the discovery of treasure, which obviously can include discovering magic items, is one of the most glorious and looked forward to moments in a D&D campaign. As silly as it sounds, it is those moments that are like Christmas or a birthday for a player when playing D&D. It's odd that we derive that much joy out of getting magic items, but we do. So let me just address one simple point here, which I think is pretty obvious, and that is to a certain degree, the discovery of magic items is essential to certain characters, particularly martial characters, particularly melee martial characters, are going to need magic weapons, and probably they're going to need magic armor. But for the martial melee characters to do their job, they really do need to get magic weapons. So you as a DM have to give them, either through the discovery of treasure or somehow giving them access to purchasing or acquiring, crafting, whatever, that magic item, that magic weapon, they're going to need that. So at the very minimum, no matter what we talk about here in the future in this video, martial melee characters must get magic weapons. They should probably also get magic armor, but the getting of magic armor is not absolutely essential to their success, but it obviously is helpful to their success. And if you were to ask any martial melee character, they would certainly tell you that it is essential, and they're probably not far off. But it isn't really truly essential, but magic weapons certainly is. And that really leads us to the next really big, probably the most important question you need to answer as a DM is, how are you going to approach magic items in general? Are they going to be, when I say common, I mean, are you going to be liberal with it? Are magic items plentiful in the world? Or are they, or at what point are they rare? So do you want to have the feeling that getting a magic item is a big deal? Because if you do, that will obviously change how often you're going to give out magic items. Because if that's what you're wanting to do, but you're handing out magic items left and right, well, you're not really reinforcing that idea that you're trying to create in your campaign. And the idea of how plentiful magic items will be is the real question that needs to be answered is, how present is magic in your world? So if you're playing in Forgotten Realms, for example, then, well, magic is pretty present. It's pretty omnipresent. There's magic all over the place. So magic items, naturally speaking, you could assume that they should be more common in that kind of a setting. But if you're dealing in a homebrew world, you really have to define that idea very clearly, because however present magic will be in the world, magic items should be a few steps behind that because they take time to create. So once you have that idea and you've got a basic framework of how magical the world is and how common magic items will be, then you can more accurately address your budget idea of how many magic items you want to be handing out in your campaign. Because remember, just because you're in Forgotten Realms, it's your version of Forgotten Realms or whatever world you're setting you're running. It's your version of it, and how that world plays out is up to you. My first real big point in giving out of magic items, and I touched on this earlier, is that you want to make sure that your martial characters are equipped, that they are satisfied. The martial characters are really, truly dependent upon getting these things. And it isn't just from a rule standpoint, it's from a fantasy fulfillment standpoint. If you're playing a martial character, getting a magic weapon and the finding of a magic weapon means a whole lot in people's how they approach this kind of a game. It becomes an aspect of their character. And so for that reason, I'm going to my solution that I'll give at the end here, and I'll be kind of addressing it in pieces before I get to it. You might want to think about addressing that quickly. So in other words, with the martial characters in particular, you might want to give the big magic items that even the big magic weapons earlier in the campaign than you might feel is normal, or even what is right. Like if you feel that a particular magic weapon shouldn't be given out to level 8, maybe you should give it to them at level 5, maybe level 4, provided that you're not just then escalating everything from that point. If that's their big magic weapon and that's it, well, if it's not an artifact, or if it's not something, or a legendary weapon, if it's not something that's going to be really completely overpowering and looming over everything in the campaign, giving them a significant magic weapon early that will be part of that character's identity is really important to martial characters in particular. Now, I'm not trying to say that spellcasters don't want magic items as well, but full casters in D&D are already the more powerful class. We really need to be honest with that. So balancing this out as a DM, you can do that on the fly by giving the martial characters a little bit more love with the kind of magic items that you drop that martial characters would use. So that kind of brings me to the first real big point here in giving out of magic items is, are you going to give magic items specifically designed for certain players to get, or are you going to just have a more general approach and saying, well, anybody in the party should be able to use this, so I'll put this here? If you give out magic items that are specifically obviously meant to the party for one particular character, there's value in that, and a lot of DMs do it that way. The only problem I have with that, where it is clearly meant for just that one person, is it's hard for me to explain this very well, but as a player, I always get the feeling that it feels too scripted. So what I'm saying is not that there's something wrong with a player obviously being able to use that item the best, but I think magic items are best given when at least a couple of players, characters, might be able to use that weapon, and then the choice is made as to who will get it. But now, this is not going to always be possible to do, because obviously there are certain, like, let's say you wanted to give out a Holy Avenger to a Paladin, and you've only got one Paladin in the group. In situations like that, that's just obviously a Staff of the Magi, those type of things. And these are obviously super uber weapons. But in those kind of scenarios, sure, there's really no getting around it. And that's the tricky part about giving out magic items, is that You have to figure out how you're going to do that as a DM and tread through this landmine of preferences that every player is going to have in one of the most important things a player looks forward to in a game of D&D. Now, I don't want to overstate this, but I just want to put it into perspective that if you can get this right, if you can give out the distribution of magic items, and I'm not talking about just handing out powerful magic items. I'm talking about the right kind of power level for the right character at the right time in the campaign, where that magic item will give that player's character's activation of their character resonance. If you can do that, just that one thing for the players, you will go so far in the enjoyment of the player that the players will have in the campaign, because players love their magic items, love them. If you can get this right and hit the tuning fork on you don't have to hit it every single time with every player, but if you can, you should. It's really kind of weird that something as simple as this can be this powerful and this evocative to players, but it is. So one of the worst things that you can do in giving out magic items is to play favorites, and that is very hard to do. You might personally prefer certain character classes. You might have a magic item that you want to see in the game, and maybe you're wanting to act out a wish fulfillment of your own that never got satisfied. So you want to give this player this super cool magic item, but then you don't pay that kind of attention to the rest of the players. So if you have the scripted idea of how that's going to work, that's pretty obvious, and you just do that. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with that idea. Lots and lots of DMs do it, and there's certainly nothing wrong with it. The flip side, the absolute opposite way of approaching it, is to do it randomly. Now, randomly has a lot to say for itself. I really like, and I've gone through big segments of my DMing career where I've used random distribution for magic items almost exclusively. What I like about the random method, and this means rolling from tables and blah, 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 blah from encounters, by using the random method, it is basically saying, this is what the world is giving you. I'm removing myself from this equation altogether, and the big virtue that this has is if the players get super lucky, if a player jackpots and just the right magic item for this kind of player is looking for happens, it's a deliriously happy event. But of course, there's no surety that that is how it will work. The one thing that this has going for it in addition to that is it completely removes favoritism. So if that one player does jackpot and they get the absolute perfect magic item that they want for their character and maybe is super powerful, the other players can't look at it with they still may have envy over it, but if everyone knows that you're rolling on a table and you do it openly, then there's no sense of favoritism involved there. What I would say about the random method is this. If you've never done it before, you might want to just take, and you're wanting to try it, before setting yourself up for the entire campaign to do it, maybe just try it for a particular dungeon, or try it for a few sessions. There may be good story reasons why this is completely random. Let me just also point out that there's a third step in this process, and that is, of course, the acquisition of magic items, meaning non-discovered magic items. So you purchase them, you might craft them. In my opinion, the purchasing or crafting of a magic item is the point of last resort for players. In fact, I will say that if I found my players were trying to find the magic item that they really wanted by trying to acquire it by purchase, I think that I would take that as a canary in the coal mine as a DM, that I have failed, that I haven't been paying attention to that player. I personally, this is also a personal preference of mine. I just don't like magic shops. In fact, I more than don't like them. I hate them. But they are a necessary evil in D&D for a lot of reasons. First of all, in a world where magic is super prevalent, it only makes sense that there would be magic items for sale, whether it's magic shops or some arcane network of buyers and sellers that the player has to try and get themselves involved in. I think that it makes sense that they would be there. I just don't like them. And regardless of whether you personally like them or not, I think everyone can agree it isn't really all that dramatic. And it certainly isn't fulfilling from a fantasy point of view. There is no sense of, like I said before, earlier in the video, the finding of magic items is very much like Christmas. So if players are going to magic item shops, that should be a sign to you as a DM that you got them the wrong Christmas presents. They're returning them if they're going to magic item shops. I'm not saying that you need to always be hitting the mark every single time with magic items, but if players are spending an inordinate amount of time trying to acquire magic items, that is a sure sign that you have not assessed this. Now, it could be that you were doing it randomly and they just got unlucky, and that's a whole other possibility. And in that case, then you shouldn't look at that personally at all. So in the end, my real recommendation for how to approach this is to use a mix. And I would I really like the random tables, so I would use those a good amount of the time. But I would also have a list of items that are going to be... Now, in a previous video, I talked about my living world approach to DMing. So I would have certain magic items that I know where they are in the world at this point, that I know the characters are going to want. And this allows for a fun access point into adventure, is that instead of giving out a magic item, maybe you rolled it, or maybe you have decided that you wanted to give them this particular item. Instead of giving them the item itself, you could have some kind of a clue that as to where the location of that magic item is. Now, a magic item like this, it should be a really good one. It should really make it almost irresistible for the party to go. And even though that magic item is likely going to be destined or chosen or whatever for one particular character, if it's a really good item, and if it isn't going to take up an enormous amount of time, it's going to be pretty easy for that player to convince the other players to take the time to go off on that adventure. So just by simply dealing with the giving out of a magic item, instead of giving out that magic item, making it a clue, you can there could be a whole chain of events that you wouldn't necessarily anticipate, but that can create a texture and a sense of joy in the campaign that you wouldn't have otherwise expected. And the knowledge that that particular magic item is there waiting for the player makes it far more meaningful when they actually get it. So I would use an approach like that as well as the random method, and I would always have, like I said before, have the scripted ideas of where particular magic items are, so that if a player is wanting to acquire that kind of an item, I already know where one is in the world. And instead of them going to a magic item shop, I can create a condition where they can try and they could hear about it or discover the idea that this item could be had at this place. So just remember, magic items are one of the great joys of the game for the players. It's your job to give them the opportunity to experience that joy in its fullest. And I'm going to close with this. When you are giving out magic items, don't be afraid of giving out powerful ones. Just be careful that you're not handing them out like water. But every player should have that one item that is theirs, and that it really has a meaningful either power point to their character, something that it gives access to their character. Every character should have at least one of those. And if you can do that, you've really done something great for your players. Well, that's all I've got. If you enjoyed the video, please like, please share, please subscribe. And if you're stuck and you don't know where to go, you can always search for a secret door. Until next time, I cast bless on all of you.